Generative AI, chatbots, LLMs. Generative AI, chatbots, LLMs. Those might be words that you associate nowadays as buzzwords, or maybe it's the new corporate jargon that you associate with. And I think it might be the case because it's what you have heard and listened in all the social media around the last 1.5 years. But that might be because you didn't got like a real explanation on how can you actually leverage that on your day-to-day life as a developer, as an operations engineer, as anything that you're doing related to IT. And exactly that is what we want to help you actually to understand, and that we win your attention, hopefully, by telling you that we are here to help you understand how to supercharge your software development throughout the whole life cycle of any of the projects that you are actually right now developing. My name is Maina Burkhardt. I'm a solutions architect at Amazon Web Services, and I help customers, enterprise customers, to really try to get the most value out from the services despite the state of the cloud journey that you are. And I'm also a former DevOps engineer, so that means that I truly understand which one are the pains that you have as a developer and also as operations in a day-to-day basis. And exactly that is what we are going to just go you through the whole session today. We are going to start actually explaining which one are the pains and directly the errors that you might face in a day-to-day life, but also directly bring you one of the possibilities on how to leverage actually generative AI by implementing Amazon Q and try to improve exactly this whole software development from your day-to-day life. And at the end, we are also going to showcase you directly with a demo, with hands-on experience, how to do that. But today, I'm not alone. I'm happily joined by my colleague, Hector.
Thank you, Marina. So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Hector Ibarra. I'm a principal solution architect on AWS. I have been with AWS for the last 7 years, serving customers on the manufacturing industry within Germany. So I would like to start with the basic question for all of you. If you can raise your hand, how many of you consider yourself as developers or are investing at least on a daily basis some time to do code writing? Okay, that's fine, thank you. So there is a recent analysis that shows about how much time developers worldwide are investing in writing code. Surprisingly, for those who don't know, that analysis shows that it's less than 1 hour per day investing in actually doing code writing. So the question is, what happened with the rest of the time? And probably, since you are developers, you may come familiar with certain activities that you are doing that basically 73% of your time is much more in keeping the lights on, just doing maintenance of whatever is there, making sure that what is in production stays in production. And roughly around 20%, 23%, 27% is invested in doing some innovation or code modernization in some cases. During the last, I would say, year and a half, there has been developers going through end user or commercial applications that have been around to, for example, introduce some line of code into a prompt, receive, for example, some recommendations in terms of how to optimize that code or resolve some errors, or even better, just to write some sentences and get a code out of from that sentences. That was working through the development life cycles a lot, as I said before, during the last year and a half. However, there are still some challenges that we are hearing from our customers, and if we can summarize the software life cycles into these stages that you see, the plan, the create, test and secure, and also operate, and finally the maintenance that I mentioned before. In each of these stages you will see that there are a lot of these activities that are basically not contributing to the software development life cycles, right? When we start on the planning phase, there is a lot that you have to do in terms of investigation, check the technologies, check code examples to make sure that at the end of the road you can produce something out from that code. Then, of course, you have to write the code itself, right? And how easy it is to write the code today? If you are probably a senior developer, it's much easier than if you are just starting. But what about if you're taking an application and you have to understand first the code that someone else wrote before you. Then other challenges are coming when you have to update such type of application. Doing tests and security, unit tests and doing security for some things that you may put into the code that probably is not the best practices, or at the end it could compromise the application, is also one of the important phases. On the operation, to perform and to monitor the efficiency of the codes, to check that the performance overall is doing what you are looking the application to do. And finally, on the operation part, troubleshooting, having problems, how to solve that problem, how to understand which are the best options to follow after that one, and modernization. So let's say that you have to upgrade libraries, or you have to upgrade a version of the software to a newer version, how much time it takes. We hear all of that from our customers, and that's the reason we embark into Amazon Q. Amazon Q is a generative AI assistance which helps you as customers to try to offload you from that undifferentiated heavy lifting activities that you are doing, which is not actually writing the code that produces business value. Amazon Q has two different versions initially. However, there are other domains we are working to. The first part is talking about Amazon Q Business, and in that case is where you have the opportunity to bring your data into Amazon Q, and then you can query the data through natural languages and then get insights from that data. On the developer side, it's much more to everything that I mentioned to you regarding the software development life cycles and how Amazon Q can actually help you to write code faster and to really focus into those things. Why this is important? This is super important because with the initial tools that I mentioned before that are for consumers on the end user space, these actually are not meeting the security and compliance, for example, that companies at any level, could be enterprise level, a startup level, from any industry, regulated, not regulated industry, may need. So what happens if you are a software developer and you need to understand what is going on with your code? If you want to update your code, and at the point of updating your code, you want to make sure that nobody else is using that code to do anything else that you don't want, or that you don't have visibility. These are the things that are resolved in Amazon Q, and these are the things that we are going to navigate during today's sessions. Amazon Q Developer was built in particular, I'm talking about only the developer part at the moment, was built in particular to enhance the developer experience, right? And to enhance the efficiency of any developer in your company. It's basically to do software development through conversational way of doing, and also keeping security and not compromising any data behind the scenes. When we come back to the software development life cycles that I mentioned before, then we can see which are the areas where Amazon Q developers can help you. So if we go for the planning, for example, we can take the years that AWS has as part of the cloud business, 17 years, and take all the learnings, best practices, and we can share that with you based on how we recommend you to, for example, start doing certain things. When we go into the create coding, you can create code from prompts, of course, but you can also tell Amazon Q, okay, I need to understand this code that was written by someone else, and I need to somehow fragment it and learn from it. First, I need to understand what is there. On the tests, you can go through, is there any way that we can do a vulnerability scanning of my code and probably detect certain things that needs to be changed, and also receive some recommendations on how to update that code. And the operation, and here is one of the main difference compared to this end users part, is when you start using Amazon Q with contextualized data coming from your own business. That is not going to be limited to business data that you may have in, for example, a database, but it also on how you're using your AWS account to understand what resources do you have there. So Amazon Q will be able to understand your EC2 consumption, will be able to understand Lambda, will be able to understand also Amazon S3, and also do through VPC inspection for networking troubleshooting, right? So you may know, oh, I am not reaching this part, the code is unable to execute these things, or this API is not working there. What is happening? How can I fix that one? Amazon Q can help you with such type of problems. In addition to that, the code maintenance that I mentioned before, when you have to migrate application from a legacy version to a new version, it's a lot of time that you have to invest there. So Amazon Q is currently available through the AWS console, also through IDEs. It's also through the AWS documentation, through the AWS console on the mobile version. It also has integrations on Slack and Teams. And finally, it's also available through Code Catalyst. So if we go through the first part of this software development lifecycle, the planning, it's as easy as going to the console, type how you want to start, and in this case you can type different type of questions, right? For example, for someone who is doing this for the first time and may say, listen, Amazon Q, how can I do something on regarding Lambda functions? How can I start programming a Lambda function? What is the best recommendation for you to do, for example, an inspection on my network and things like that? So then you will start having this type of answering from Amazon Q. The next thing is when you have to create code. How you can create code, and it's always through the IDE in this case, right? So you, for example, may write some comments, and out from the output of those comments, the code should be generated. You can also ask the questions about the specific parts of the code and see what happens with that specific part of the code before you even tell Amazon Q to write the code on your behalf. Amazon Q Developer Agent for software developer is the part of the solutions which basically integrates with this IDE. How it works? It works by going through your workspaces, reading the different files that are part of your workspaces, and taking that prompt that you wrote into the IDE and basically breaking the point into atomic units that can be splitted and executed in a step-by-step that then you can later take actions out from them, from the recommendations that Amazon Q will deliver to you. That may include writing code, that may include summarizing code, that may include doing database schema updates, for example, and also can be summarizing a piece of code or one file, completely one file to you to understand how it works. Later, you have the opportunity to collect all those recommendations and apply those recommendations into a single file or multiple files within your workspace. So the next part is going to be the test and secure. When we are in the test and secure phase is where we go through the software development life cycle and we say, okay, listen, before moving into production, is there any risk that I have here? And as you can see in this very basic example, the risk that Amazon Q has detected is that there is a hard-coded username and password, which of course, I believe no one of you is going to do such type of things at this point of time. But you don't only know what is happening there, but also you get a way on how to fix it, the recommendation on how to fix that. During the operations and diagnosis, let's say that you have an event. The event comes, the event has a problem, and then you need to understand what happened with that event. What was the issue in reality for that event? Then Amazon Q can take the event, go through the knowledge database, go through your contextualized data, so that means the things are available in your AWS account, and from there bring recommendations to you to fix those issues. Amazon Q Developer is not only limited for this type of recommendations. As I said before, it also understands the different resources that you have in your account. So that means that, for example, you can query it and just ask for how many Lambda functions do I have, what are those Lambda functions doing, how much cost I am incurring by doing this, the execution for these certain resources, how much cost I incur with it. Is there any way that I can do something better coming from the Cost Explorer part? The next layer is going to be Amazon Q Developer Agent Code Transformation. We are using that one when you have legacy code that is going to be, for example, out of support, and that legacy code needs to be updated. In this case, we have a Java 8 version of the code that needs to be adapted to Java 17. And how it works. When we started thinking about how to build this service, initially we said, okay, probably if we just drop the code to an LLM model, it will give us a new version and it will work. Unfortunately, we realized that that was not possible. That was not working, right? That, of course, brings some insights, some input, some good things that you can implement, but at the end of the road, there was no real tangible benefit for developers in doing that. So what we did is, how can we change that one? So initially we said, let's take the code. Let's say that you as a customer give us a code. We take the code, we build the code, we test the code, and then we can detect if there's anything wrong in that code before even we go for a migration path. And the question is going to be, if we detect that something wrong is in that code in that build press, how can we basically take that knowledge? From where are we going to take that knowledge? Is that an LLM? The answer is no. We build our own database based on hundreds of lines of codes, millions of lines of codes that we have in AWS, but also things that are available on the internet where problems are already solved. And when we build that knowledge in the way that we can apply the fixes to that code at that point of time, then what happens is we rebuild the application, we transform the application into the new versions, which is going to be in this case in Java 17. And then at that point of time, we use generative AI because the code was already fixed from us if we think that something better needs to happen there. And when that happens, generative AI comes again to that database and implement any change or anything that is needed for the code to run in the next version. We return that to you with all the things that you need, all the different files that you need to apply to either accept or not accept the changes, and you have the application in the new version already modernized. So in this phase, the Amazon Q Developer Agent for Code is going to help you to modernize application faster. And again, coming back to the topic that I said at the very beginning, it is all about developer experience. In running a code modernization, most likely will not bring any business value. It's just something that you need to update, and that's it. You have to do it. So why we don't do it in an automatic fashion way? Some examples of this is that in AWS, we took a team of 5 persons who were doing roughly around 1,000 applications written in Java that needed to be modernized. And they were able to modernize those 1,000 applications in 2 days. That is an average of 10 minutes per applications running the upgrade. So as a summary of this, when we go into what you are going to achieve with this software transformation and software modernization, is to move out your technical debt, because it's legacy software that if you go into extended contract supports, you may need to pay more, and in this case you can do that modernization faster. The next thing is, of course, increase the developer experience, right? Because the efficiency of the developer is going to be much more, and also the experience from the developer will feel that it's investing the time in the things that brings business value. And finally, the security aspect of that one that I mentioned before, to improve the security overall. However, Amazon Q is not only limited to this aspect. I mentioned before that it also has integration with QuickSight. It also has integration with Amazon Connect, which is a call center solution from AWS. But you can also help users, business users, or even developers to go through our integrations with Redshift or with Glue. So that means that through this conversational way of working, the user at the end, the business user or the developer, can go and generate the queries that are needed, or Q will generate the queries that are needed to retrieve the right business answers that they are looking for. With that, I would like to change to the new topic, which is going to be, can we see all of this in action? Can we see certain pieces on how actually it works beyond the small pieces that I showed before? And for that, Marina is going to help you to go through that direction.
And that's why it's demo time. And actually, I saw a lot of raised hands already when actually Hector asked how many of you are developers, DevOps engineers, and actually can actually rely of everything that generative AI with Amazon Q can actually leverage for you. And exactly because of that, you might be a techie then. And techies heavily rely on demonstrations because we really like to know what's behind, what's under the hood, and how can we actually implement everything and put our hands dirty with it. And that's why we brought you one example that might resonate with you, and it's by modernizing a neglected Java application. So let's put ourselves in the following context. AWS Elastic Beanstalk is going to return Java 8 at end of September. And the original developer that actually implemented all the project that you already jumped in left the company 1 year ago. So you, or myself, for example, in this case, the developer who is just fulfilling the backfill position just a year later, not only does not have experience with Java, but also already have a whole backlog of features already in place waiting for me in order to implement everything. So I would like to leverage Amazon Q here and get started with it. So first of all, I'm a developer, but I do not have experience with Java. So the first thing that is going to come to my mind is, how do I actually even host a Java application on AWS? And of course, I can just directly go to the whole documentation that AWS provides me and read it and go through it and just see all the different details needed for it. But I do know about Amazon Q, and I would like actually to leverage Amazon Q and ask directly Amazon Q that question. So I'm going to just go and click on the bottom right, the Amazon Q icon, and ask Amazon Q, how do I host a Java application on AWS? I'm going to get here a whole explanation of, for example, use Elastic Beanstalk, a step-by-step explanation of installing, for example, SDK, using the CLI, and a couple of comments on how to actually host directly something on Elastic Beanstalk. But actually, my team is already using Elastic Beanstalk. I would like to modernize it, and therefore I ask Amazon Q a follow-up question on how do I actually can use other services that might be, for example, serverless instead of it. So therefore I get the recommendation of using step functions, of using SQS, of using Lambda, of using API gateways, and other services as well. Now that I already know a little bit more on how to host that application on AWS, I would like to get to know if I even can actually implement that with the different roles associated to my IAM, the permissions associated to my IAM role already in place. And I would not only like to know if I'm already able to do that with the IAM role that I already have in place, but if there is any other mechanism that I should, for example, use to request those new permissions that I need for it. So I'm already aware that my team and the CCOE, for example, so the Cloud Center of Excellence of the company where I'm working for, has already implemented a customized chatbot with Amazon Q underneath that is actually leveraging other data sources on top as well. And in this case is Atlassian Suite, for example, which has, for example, JIDA for the ticketing system that many of you might use or might know, and also Confluence for any wiki with all the documentation in place for any standard procedure. And that might be really beneficial for us because I'm a new developer in the team, and I might not know how to raise any ticket to request a new permission, a new service, or something to use in the organization that I'm working at. So what I'm going to do is to just directly ask the question, what are the services or the 3 services that I already got recommended by Amazon Q? Am I allowed to actually use those? And actually 2 out of 3 are already accepted or already enabled in the user that I have. Just let's go further and try to get the permission for the 3rd one, which in this case, actually Amazon Q finds out that there is already a CCOE meeting happening once a month, for example, where they just review all the tickets that they have in place, where every single developer requests, for example, an access. So what I'm going to do is to just create a Jira ticket. So create that raising the ticket in order to get that extra permission set that I need in order to implement the whole application that I need to modernize. So what I'm doing here is to not only use that automation and that correlation to JIDA, but also ask Amazon Q to summarize my whole conversation and put it actually as a description and as the context of the Jira ticket that I just tried to create. So again, leveraging generative AI for this. So that we already know how to host the application, and we already know which is the permission set that we already have in place. So let's say that I can actually already use all the services. Let's get our hands dirty and try to upgrade to Java 17. So what I brought you here is a really simple example. It's a calculator. And, oh, sorry. I don't know if... Give me 1 second. There you go, the demo goes. Can happen, demos fails all the time, and that's the case here, but now the automation is working. So we have 3 main files that we would like to take a look here. So we have our main class, which is the calculator, and we also have some test here in place, also written in Java. But first, I would like to take a look to the version, the Maven version, which is the one that we also need to take a look at in order to upgrade to the needed version of Java. So what I'm going to do here is to just ask Amazon Q to transform my code. I'm going to just select the code, the whole source, and I'm also going to select the version that I would like to upgrade to. So Amazon Q here is going to think a little bit, get all the different changes needed, and in the transformation hub section, I will be able to see the status of everything. Once it's already finished, what I'm going to be able to see is the preview of the code transformation that Amazon Q planned for me. So I can see here a step-by-step description of what are the recommendations that Amazon Q has in place for myself. So after letting Amazon Q finish with everything, what I will be able to see, and what I want to see actually, is to see those proposed changes. So I can just click here on the download proposed changes, and I will be able to see the differences between each file that Amazon Q changed for me, the recommendations on it, but also see that actually it tried to execute the tests that I had before. So that means that Amazon Q also uploaded everything in a secure environment and run everything to make sure that everything works. The new version is already in place. I also see here the syntax changes needed for the new Java version. And actually, I'm happy with the proposed changes. So what I'm going to do next, after reviewing once again the whole summary and seeing the step-by-step explanation of what Amazon Q has proposed for me, what I'm going to do is accept those changes. And again, we have here some new recommendations of Amazon Q already implemented. It doesn't end up here. So the first step is already now done. But what we would like to do, or what I would like to do as a developer here in this new project, is to also improve the test coverage that is already in place for this specific project. So as you remember, maybe and hopefully, Amazon Q already showed us in the preview part that 2 tests were actually executed correctly. And that's because 2 tests are already in place, but I would like to add a couple more. So what I'm going to do is to just directly jump to my file, the one that has already the test, but I'm new here in the team. And again, I do not know what actually that code is doing. So what I'm going to just do is to select the test and send it directly to Amazon Q and ask Amazon Q to explain that code for me. What I'm going to get here is a whole explanation of which one are the input variables, how does the function actually work under the hood, and also a brief summarization of what Amazon Q thinks that test is really covering. So again, what I'm going to do is to just select then the function to which one I would like to add a test for it, and directly ask Amazon Q to just generate me one for that specified function that I picked. After letting Amazon Q work a little bit, he's going to give us a step-by-step explanation of how to actually really implement a new test for that specific method. The description of the whole input variables, the description of each part of the code that actually Amazon Q is providing to us. But I would like to go just one step further. And that one step further would be not only like read the code or the step-by-step proposed, but also ask Amazon Q to write it for me. So I would just go to the test part and I will start writing that test, but I will see that actually Amazon Q is going to recommend me the next lines of codes with the code for that test that I actually asked for it before. So again, we are going to have here 2 new tests because I'm adding a second one. And I would, of course, like to run and test all the code by running and executing all of my tests and see if they are all running in a successful way, which is the case. We had before 2, we added 2 more, now we have 4 out of 4. But let's add just another test. So in this case, it's going to be like an edge scenario, so dividing by 0. If I just put dividing by 0 as a comment, Amazon Q is going to again start recommend me a new test with the explanation that I already give it. If we run everything again, we will have 5 out of 5, and that means all the different tests that I have here are working as expected. It doesn't matter which role you have. It doesn't matter if you're a techie or if you're a non-technical persona. If you're a developer, DevOps engineer, networking engineer, doesn't matter. In my opinion, documentation is key. And therefore, it's really important that we also try to leverage generative AI for exactly trying to improve the documentation that we already have in place, not only for the description of the whole use case, but also documenting the code that we already have here in this specific project. So let's try to get and see in action how can we actually do that together. So we have here our whole main file and the test file. What I would like to do is to just add with annotations 2 specific or 2 other annotations related to the params and the returns in all the 2 different classes that I already have in place. So I'm going to just, in a natural language way, directly Amazon Q how to do it. And again, here we were going to have a step-by-step explanation on where and why should we add in which part of the functions the 2 annotations that we just ask Amazon Q to help us with. Again, I would like to get one step further and not just read the explanation and the recommendation that Amazon Q gives us, but also generate that code for me. So really, we'll be able to, with this preview, just gonna be able to click each one of the different files that were changed by Amazon Q and see here and realize that the annotations that I wanted to add in order to improve my documentation are already here in place. Again, I want to check everything before really implementing the changes. I'm happy with those changes, so I'm going to just accept them and let Amazon Q write that changes for me. Again, we are not going to leave that project as it is. We want to start actually again executing everything and see if the tests are working and if everything is working as expected so that we can later on proceed. So let's verify it if everything works, and yep, still works. So that means documentation is already in place. I would love to do a really perfect demo saying that everything works perfectly every single time that we implement something. But of course, it's not the case. I mean, we are all techies. We know that every single time that we start a project, something is breaking. So the idea is to also help you to understand how can you leverage Amazon Q in the troubleshooting part for example, in this case, Lambda. So the code that we wrote, Java related, or the one that I showed to you, was actually for a Lambda. So the recommended service that Amazon Q gave me at the very beginning on which one would be the stack of services that I can use actually to host a Java application on AWS. So again, let's try to see how to actually leverage Amazon Q here. We can see Java 17, so the upgrade that we wanted to do at the very beginning is already in place. But let's try to just execute a test, a batch of tests. So, and when running it here, of course, it's a demo, so it's going to break on purpose. We can see here on the Lambda, in the output of the Lambda, all the different logs and realize why. What's the reason of the failure? We can read it, or we can also just ask Amazon Q to help us troubleshoot it and realize which one could be the whole analysis and the root issue of it. And of course, try to help me to resolve it. So just give me a step-by-step explanation on why it failed and how can I actually remediate that. So again, here we have yet another possibility on how to leverage Amazon Q in our day-to-day life in this part of the project. But we're still not done. Remember that I also mentioned that since this was a backfill position after 1 year, there was really like a whole feature backlog in place waiting for me. And now we can add a couple more features directly to these projects. So in this case, we would like to add like a square function, so yet another normal function to a calculator. And again, I'm going to just write function to square a number as a comment. And here Amazon Q is going to auto-recommend us the next lines of codes with the contextualization that we gave them before. But if you notice, and if you put a little bit of attention here, and hopefully it's big enough, we can see here the params and the returns annotations as well. And this is because we asked Amazon Q before to help us with the documentation of our method. So that means it kept that in memory, and actually kept that same structure that we teach it before. All right, but let's try to go yet another step further. And that step further is going to just help us to do a little bit more automated, yet another function that we would like to add. And that's the case that we are going to do right now, or showcase here right now with Code Catalyst. And in Code Catalyst, what we are going to do is to just create and generate a new ticket, a new task, yet another developer task. And by creating the issue, I would like to, for example, create a square root task, and I'm going to just provide a detailed explanation of what I would like to do in that specific developer ticket. But I'm not going to assign it to me, I'm going to assign it to Amazon Q, and hope that Amazon Q do that for me, writes the code for me. So when creating the ticket, Amazon Q is going to take a little bit to just realize what are the needed steps to do. And after a little bit, I'm going to be able to see here the whole background and the explanation of the step-by-step that Amazon Q would implement for me with the context that I gave in the description of the ticket, and also be able to change some of the settings if I would like to just stop in each step-by-step that Amazon does for me. Going to just confirm here the whole setup and the settings that Amazon provided to me. And here I'm going to just proceed and see the whole preview of the background, so what actually Amazon understood from the ticket that from the context that I gave, the step-by-step explanation, so the whole approach that Amazon Q is going to follow. And I would like to just proceed with that because I'm happy with the step-by-step that Amazon Q provide us, and click the proceed button here inside of Code Catalyst. When everything is already finished, Amazon Q is going to generate and create a pull request for us with all the different code changes that were needed in order to execute whatever was intended for this specific development ticket. We can see here the changes, the proposed code changes that Amazon Q did for us. And if we are happy with this, I'm going to approve the pull request and merge the code directly to our repository as well. It's just a simple command, looks good for me, or approved. We confirmed, and we can merge directly to our source code. All right, now I would also like to assess the impact of this new code and the changes that we made on our use case or our project, which was the calculator. And for that, what I'm going to do is to just leverage generative AI on Amazon QuickSight, which is a possibility to visualize data with a nice dashboard, for example, in place. And what I'm going to do here is to just ask with NLPM, what are the costs associated to ECS, for example, in a monthly way in the past year? And Amazon QuickSight is going to provide me with a dashboard here in order to see and realize a couple of metrics. Metrics like, for example, the highest and the lowest month, and also the growth rate as well. But I would be interested in the forecast part. So how actually those changes made a difference or created an impact in the resource consumption of all our services used for that project. And we can see actually here that the costs actually were reduced. So that means the change that we made on our code help us to actually also reduce the consumption of our resources. I hope this demo was nice to you. It got you some insights. It was like interesting in order to try to kick that off by yourself as well. So I would just give 2-3 seconds while Hector is jumping here on the stage to also continue with the talk, to also scan the different get started page and the documentation for Amazon Q as well.
All right. So before we close, thank you for the applause. One important topic for everybody is all about how to go through this journey of upskilling people, right? And in particular, having new joiners into the game. You may say, which are the new roles that all these technologies are bringing into the space? And you will see that typically we were using developer. Oh, I am a developer, or I am a data science, or I am a DevOps engineer. Do I have a new title? Do I have a new role if I am a developer which actually use generative AI or services as the one that we said? And yes, it's GenAI developer. And yes, it's GenAI data science. And yes, it's ML ops engineer at the moment, right? And there is a training and certification path to go through all these journeys. And these are the new roles that are going to be showing up in the near future. So we encourage you to look at these certifications too and go through it if you consider necessary. Now, thank you very much for everything. We appreciate your feedback.